I was not exposed to the use cases. And I was pretty skeptical, right, to be honest. And more importantly, I let my emotional response to something that happened a few months later. And again, I think we talked about this. I wrote one paragraph, right? Not a long paragraph, just one paragraph, 40-page letter on why I thought Bitcoin might be an interesting, what I quoted or what I deemed a special situation investment for a diversified portfolio. Again, don't put all your portfolio in it, but try it. And I joked, the next paragraph was about Saudi equities, which with the benefit of hindsight is way more controversial than Bitcoin. I mean, it's not even close. But I had people saying, look, we'll fire you as our advisor if you don't stop talking about that stupid stuff. And so I did what a business person would do. I said, okay, fine. We'll talk about it. And to your point about price shouldn't impact conviction, I think is such great insight, because price did impact my feelings because I hadn't formed a conviction yet. But we went from 500 in April to 175 by September. And that price movement made me say emotionally, those guys were right. See, I don't need to pay attention.
It's dead. Right.
And it's dead. And then it went from 175 to 300 to 500 again, then got back to 1,000. Like, oh, wait a second. And again, price shouldn't influence. But what that price movement did, it didn't change my conviction because I had no conviction at that point. But what it did is it made me do the work. And that's the key to all of this, is everyone I know that I respect that started skeptical, then did the work, and is now wildly bullish. And I probably shouldn't even use wildly, just bullish, right? You don't have to be wildly bullish, you just have to be bullish. And they're bullish not on price, they're bullish on the technology, they're bullish on the innovation, they're bullish on the evolution, the financial evolution. I call it financial natural selection. Right? If you're not scared about what's happening to our currency, and not just our currency, to the euro, to the yen, to all the developed market currencies, if you're not scared by that, you're not paying attention. And I talked about this right before we talked. I had done my 10 surprises for the year, and not right before, but in January that year. And in that, I said, look, my bonus surprise was Bitcoin is likely to have a really good year. Now, I didn't think it was going to be up 300%. Don't get me wrong. I thought it would have a really good year. But what I said was not necessarily because Bitcoin will make any great strides, but because the dollar, the fiat, will get destroyed. And that's the whole issue around money illusion. Right? People look at the stock market. Oh, stocks are up. Well, they're only up if you denominate them in a depreciating currency, the dollar. Right. If I denominate stocks in gold, they're not up over the last 3 years. If I denominate them in Bitcoin,
it's getting crushed, right?
It's getting crushed. And Bitcoin exists as Bitcoin, where people say one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, but that's not the way you and I do it, right? We buy it in dollars. Someone in Germany buys it in euro. Someone in Japan buys it in yen. Someone in, Venezuela, hopefully they don't buy it in bolivars. Hopefully they just buy it with something else and get out of the bolivar. So that price is relative to something else. And what we are all relative to is a devaluing, depreciating asset, because, right, governments, when pressed throughout history, will always devalue the currency, right? They will always devalue the currency because it is the only way out. And this idea that somehow we're going to grow our way out of the debt problems that we have, not going to happen. There are some, right, that look at it and say, well, the white paper says a peer-to-peer cash network, and that's not what this is. well, okay, but technology can change, right? There are lots of examples. History is replete with examples where something was invented for one thing and then found its best use case in doing something else. Lots of examples of that. How about what my favorite actually is artificial sweetener, aspartame.
What was it invented for? I don't even know.
This is awesome. So they were exploding bombs, ordnances in these rooms to test them. And the generals and stuff would walk in and they'd notice that it tasted sweet, right? There was this film in the air, particles in the air. And I thought, that tastes sweet. And I wonder why that is. So the chemist kind of looked at it and said, oh, that's the formaldehyde that when it implodes, one of the, I don't remember if it's one of the H's or one of the O's, it doesn't really matter. I think it's one of the H's gets blown off. And that is aspartame. And so
remind me to avoid that.
Well, that's the crazy thing. That's why they say if you drink too much diet soda, you get tip of the tongue disease. Right. Because formaldehyde, okay, when you drink too much, it goes into your bloodstream and it essentially gets an H back and turns into formaldehyde. And formaldehyde in your system is probably not a good thing. So, but that wasn't. But it is a perfectly fine invention, right? And lots of people use it, but it came from something else. And so I think this idea that Bitcoin must be bad because it wasn't, Satoshi's original vision, that's silly.
Yeah. The
second thing is when we think about money, right? Money has a lot of different functions, right? It can be a medium of exchange, right? You and I could exchange money for goods and services. It can be a store of value unless there is an entity, usually a government, that can create more of it by fiat. And so if you look at the history of money, and it's interesting because I literally just got back from this trip to San Francisco, my first trip in over a year, and I went out there to help film basically a history of Bitcoin and history of money series that some guys are putting together. And I think it's going to be amazing. And my job was episode 1, kind of explain the history of money. So I did a lot of research on the history of money and how coins were created and how Bitcoin is an evolution of that. And, money is really interesting. It's been around for thousands of years. Literally, there have been coins for thousands of years. And, when you got wealthy and you had too many coins, you couldn't carry them around. Your donkey or your mule or your camel got tired of carrying those big sacks of coins. So you deposit them in a bank and they would give you a certificate that turned into paper money. Or as the Chinese, the original Shang dynasty, called it flying money. Because if you put it down outside and didn't pay attention, it would fly away. And unlike coins.